Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about potential tech cards with the new GD02 format. I personally prefer to include some tech cards into my deck builds, even though I know that's not everyone's cup of tea. So to start out, what's a tech card if you haven't heard about it? A tech card is usually a card added into your deck that isn't necessarily required to help your deck function, or you aren't relying to seeing that card to obtain your win condition. Usually, this includes cards that are high level, high cost that kind of help, would brick your turn, for example. And then, given the lack of consistency in the current game state, this should be only ran as like 1 to 2 copies per tech card. I wouldn't even go more than like 2 tech cards in a current deck. Again, given the lack of consistency, and many decks don't have a lot of draw power or searchability, stuff like that. And it could be a unit, pilot, or command card. Ideally, it is a pilot or command card with burst. That way, if you're running a 1 copy of a certain card and it ends up in your life or in your shield, then if your opponent breaks that shield, you just add it to your hand immediately instead of it being a unit. And then you're like, oh, well, I just lost that, potential spice I had in my deck. And then a tech card is not necessarily isn't it's not necessary to build your deck, and it's not going to help you win a tournament or bigger tournaments. But some people do include it if, like, hey, I'm going to my local tournament, I see a lot of breach cards, or I run into a lot of green white wing. This seeing this card can potentially help me swing the momentum or kind of help me potentially go for game or stuff like that. So just to go over some GD01 examples, Witch and the Bride saw some action as a one-off or 2 copies in GD01 to kind of help potentially bounce any beefy blockers or a swing from a big unit on the defensive side. Battle of Aces, same thing. It's also playing some of the ping decks early in the format as another way to kind of help finish off some of those units that you would maybe ping for one and then just use Battle of Aces to finish it off, or even a burst. It's still a deal 2 damage, so it's essentially like a close combat. And again, the reason for that is this is level 3, cost 2. So when you're on curve, it's pretty much that's the only card you're really able to play. And then I ran Bandager Links in my blue white builds in GD01, mostly just to kind of help beef up some of my units in the late game. Like on the Freedom, for example, you can turn the Freedom into a 6/8 or a Lifrith into a 4/6, which is very hard for some cards or some certain decks to kind of deal with, especially a blocker with eight HP. They're gonna have to swing multiple units if they want to clear it, or else it's just gonna keep living on board. And then some of the blue green aggro decks included a 1 copy of Gun Cannon to kind of help give Amro another link, and it also potentially gave the opportunity to rest 2 cards with when paired, choose one enemy unit with 2 or less HP, rest it. So then you'd get the Amro for 5 HP, then the Gun Cannon for 2, and that could kind of help you clear board or potentially rest a weakened blocker to kind of go for game. Now, going into some potential GD02 tech cards, Sayla's light type gun cannon, she's essentially a Corsica based killer for the tokens, because on deploy, choose one enemy unit token, deal 2 damage to it. So that essentially just takes care of the Tallgeese there and there. Her link is with Salem Mass, so it's kind of forcing you to play red blue. But I don't think you're really looking to link this card. You're just probably playing another 1 copy of this in case you see Corsica base, and in case you see this card, it can kind of help you push for that easy removal without having to waste a body into it or a block or something like that. And then Sugai's Gelgoog, same thing. This one's very expensive at level 4, cost 4. You can't even link it on curve. But deploy, choose one enemy unit that's level 5 or higher, deal 2 damage to it. So this can kind of help in the later game, kind of get rid of some of those beefy units that, if you're running red and you're constantly pinging units, this can kind of help finish something off. Without having to swing into it, without having to run the actual pilot to link it to swing or wait another turn to swing. It's an on-deploy effect, which I think, in my opinion, is pretty good. And then the all range attack. This is one of the cards where I feel like you might have 2 to 3 copies of this card, just because it's such a wide range of deal 1 damage to all enemy units other than link units. But then again, at level 4, I feel like most people have some sort of link card that you need to deal with on board, and that this doesn't really deal with that at all. The burst is nice, so choose one enemy unit, deal 1 damage to it. Worst case scenario, if it's in your shield. And then going on the purple side, we have Momentary Respite, which choose 1 purple pilot card from your trash, add it to your hand. Being a level 4, cost 3, you could still technically play this, get your pilot, and then link another unit with your pilot if you needed to. And then again, the command cards with a burst is probably the best tech cards you can add, because worst case scenario here, you're just drawing one. Same thing with the Decisive Last Resort. it has a very convoluted and complicated, I wouldn't say complicated, it's very hard to achieve that 6 purple units from your trash by level 5. So it's very much a late game kind of card. You see Wing or you see Freedom on the other side late in the game. You play this down, it's immediately dead. You didn't have to waste any units, anything like that. You can just remove it and then kind of swing for game if you're playing against a Freedom or something like that, and they're just trying to hold on for dear life. And then worst case again, the burst on this one is pretty good. Choose one enemy unit that's level 3 or lower, deal 2 damage to it. And then Awakened Power doesn't have a burst, but it's pretty good. Late in the game, you can just choose one unit that's level 5 or lower from your trash, play its cost to deploy it. You can't. It has to be a level 4 essentially to play this, and then pay its cost to leak it. But it could help get another body on board, or if you have the pilot and don't have the unit, this can kind of help you play the unit, link it, and then swing for potentially game. Uh, Going forward, the Gundam Air rebuild, she becomes a blocker when paired, which I think is kind of big for this because you don't necessarily need to run the Suletta Mercury if you don't want to, if it doesn't fit in your package. You could just play a one off of this, and it's very scary because you could pair it with anything you have, and you have the four or more command cards in your trash, which I feel like if you're playing white, you probably do with unforeseen incident, striker pack, overflowing affection, stuff like that. So you have another blocker on board, and then the next turn, if it's not a link, it's going to get high maneuver. So just that threat of being high maneuver, especially late in the game where that might be what seals the game, kind of forces your opponent to either deal with it or lose the game. Same thing with Laughter Franklin. This pilot is pretty interesting where it's if this attack, if this unit is damaged in level 5 or lower, it gains high maneuver during this battle. It's not what really makes this card kind of over the top for me. If you want to run it as a tech card, it's not color restricted, right? So you could essentially have your Ale Strike block the turn before, survive, and then play this down, and now it has high maneuver. Especially even in a green white scenario where your Ale Strike or your Lipfith gets burned by Wing on the next turn, you put this under it, you're swinging for high maneuver. They can't block it if it's a green white or something like that. And then they're kind of forced to deal with that unit instead of going for your shields, which I think is pretty good. And then lastly, this dramatic turnabout, choose one friendly damaged unit, it recovers 2 HP, then draw 1. It kind of does the whole Psycho Gundam 4 link effect for you. And then also, worst case scenario, you're just drawing 1 here. So I think that's pretty strong. And if you just want it as a one off or something like that. Yeah. So at the end of the day, you know, no way, shape, or form do you need tech cards to be competitive or win tournaments. It's all about just building how you're comfortable. Some people prefer to stick to the most optimized structure, not risk any of the ratios with the inclusion of tech cards. Others, realistically don't mind having, cards in their deck that are one-off copies, right? They feel like if they see it, they see it. If they don't, it's not the end of the world, and it won't really impact their game structure. Uh, I would just say try it for yourself. You may be uncomfortable at first, but then you may see, hey, this kind of does help me in certain scenarios and in certain matchups and stuff like that. Uh, I personally have found that I probably only include one tech card per deck, or maybe two potentially, depending on what kind of color scheme I'm going with. But yeah, just go ahead and give it a try for yourself. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and let me know in the comments how you feel about including tech cards in your deck, because I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. Like I said in the beginning, I'm always interested to hear how people view about it. And also, please consider subscribing to the channel for if you enjoy Gundam TCG content. I started this channel as just like an outlet to help me yap about the game, and then different, and think about different deck builds that I think about late at night and stuff like that. My ultimate goal of meeting more people in the community and to get different viewpoints from the community to help my overall knowledge. Because I know when I'm doing certain decks, I definitely don't consider certain things, and then people in the comments let me know, you should probably change this to this, and it's a route I never even considered, which I think is always helpful in trying to figure out how to play the game and stuff like that. So, until the next time, guys, hope everyone's doing well and enjoying GD02. All right, see you guys later. Bye.